Hello, everyone, and welcome to Study Travel TV Live, a show of news, statistics, and opinion. I'm Bethan Norris, Senior Editor of StudyTravel Magazine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Josh Walton, Staff Journalist at StudyTravel Magazine. Before we get started, for the best viewing experience, please put the call-in side-by-side speaker view. You'll see an icon in the top right corner where you can select the view.
We're delighted to welcome you all today to this episode of Study Travel TV Live. In today's broadcast, we'll start with a news story, and then we'll be joined by our guests this week, Andrew Mangion, CEO of EC English, and Gabriela Ardito, CEO of VCE International and President of the Argentine Study Abroad Association, ARSAA.
If you have any questions for the presenters or guest speakers or comments on the stories, please post them in the chat box and we'll read them out at the end. A big thank you to the sponsor of this episode, Londonist.
So let's take a look at our first story. A short survey has been conducted by the Association of Language Travel Organisations, ALTO, on the impact of rising prices on language schools.
Through the 2-minute survey, the impact of global inflation on the international education industry, ALTO aims to build a picture of expected price rises, what rises would be acceptable to clients, and the appetite for more dynamic pricing.
Leanne Lineker, chair of ALTO, told Study Travel Magazine, global inflation is impacting schools and agents on numerous fronts, pushing up staff costs, accommodation costs, and supplier costs. ALTO is keen to help the industry understand the extent of price rises we could expect over the coming months and years, and the frequency with which we could increase or decrease them to reflect real-time inflation.
Contributors will receive full access to the results, while an executive summary will be released for the wider industry. The potential impact of global inflation on the language travel sector was one of the topics of discussion at the recent ALTO Professional Development and Networking Conference in Rome last month.
So at this point, we'd like to introduce our guests, Andrew and Gabby. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Bethan. Hi, Joshua.
Hello.
Hi.
Bueno.
Hi, Gabby. So let's start with Andrew. Global inflation is a topic that language schools must be having to face this year.
That's absolutely affirmative, Bethan. I mean, I'm looking at the headlines right now from the Financial Times, and it says breaking news: Eurozone inflation hits a record 8.1%. We're seeing inflation records, 40-year highs in the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon. This is a global issue. So burying our heads in the sand and sort of pretending that it's not going to hit us is just not going to cut it. On the ground, what we're seeing is we're under huge pressure to address increasing costs in all areas of our operation. And this is across all destinations. It's not just one destination. I mean, we operate, as you know, in 16 cities and six countries. And you know, it's impacting us across all destinations. Although in the UK, we're already facing utility bills, for example, which have more than doubled in the last few months.
Thank you. And Gabby, what about your students? How price conscious are they at the moment? And are cheaper destinations or courses winning out? Hi, Gabby. I'm not sure if you heard the question there, but what about your students? How price conscious are they at the moment? And are cheaper destinations or courses winning out currently?
Argentine students have always been price conscious for different reasons. I mean, nowadays, there is a crisis which is worldwide, but we have been suffering high inflation rates for decades. We are so much used to it. So now there is a triple impact, you know, the local inflation, global inflation on top of the local inflation, plus we have a ban on money transfers abroad. So whenever you want to transfer funds abroad, you have to pay two taxes. One is 30% and the other one is 35%. So anything you buy abroad costs 65% more expensive. So you can imagine, I mean, how sensitive to this our students are.
And which are the most popular destinations with your students at the moment?
We should separate the segments in order to have some figures. If we talk about groups of adults and junior students who want to have a study abroad experience, a short-term study abroad, the #1 destination has always been the UK. Yes, teachers of English wishing to do the CELTA or Delta course or some teacher refresher course, also the UK. The second most popular destination would be the US for groups. Then for study and work programs, the most popular destination right now is Ireland. And then for high school programs, Canada is #1. And we also have a demand for the US and the UK. Then college and university, Canada, #1. And work and travel, the US as well. Now everyone is expecting to see what happens with Australia and New Zealand, of course.
Okay, thank you. And Gabby, again, are you finding that your own agency costs are increasing, and are you passing on this increase to students?
Well, we try not to do that because, I mean, we are trying to absorb the increase as much as we can, because this is a very special moment. I mean, we are trying to recover. We are trying to rebuild customer loyalty. And I mean, they know who we are. They know that what we offer is good quality, but now price is a key factor that will definitely determine student choice. So we have to be careful.
Thank you, Gabby. Okay.
Josh, if I could just jump in on the back of what Gabby was saying,
sure.
Obviously, you know, I can very much empathize with Gabby around what it's like operating in Argentina. As you may know, I owned and ran schools in Argentina between 2010 and 2014. And, you know, I used to be shocked seeing inflation in Argentina going up by 50 to 60% per year. It was, as she's saying, a fact of life. The reality is that inflation in the rest of, you know, the Western world, let's call it that, has remained relatively low. If you look at inflation rates over the last 40 years, they've been in single-digit percentages, you know, 1.5%, 2%, 3%. But the reality is that the current realities being faced worldwide today are real. We are really having to increase our salary rates to our teachers and our most sort of vulnerable, so to speak, frontliners. Host families are just saying, look, you know what, we're only going to take students if the host family rates go up, and if they're not, we're just going to go to Airbnb. So I think these realities are realities we're just going to have to face. And we need to also remember the fact, Josh and Bethan, that, you know, the industry has come through 2 years of hell. We've got balance sheets that have just been, you know, blown to pieces. And the only way to rebuild the health of the industry is to at least compensate for the inflationary increases we're seeing.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a look at another story now. UK University Admissions Service, UCAS, has released a report called Where Next? What influences the choices of international students make, based on UCAS application trends and a survey of 1,270 prospective international students, either applicants through UCAS or clients of US-based College Board, which operates the SAT and advanced placement tests.
The authors found that 10% of international students had started thinking about studying abroad before their 11th birthday, and more than 3/4 said that a decision about which country to study in was made during high school.
Students were often following in the footsteps of their families, as 47% of those surveyed said that a parent or close relative had previously studied abroad.
The authors said that students were increasingly independent, with more than half declaring that their own research informed the choice of country, although 28% said that they used agents as an information source. Overall, 1/3 of students had used an agent for their application, but rates were higher in India at 49% and China 37%, compared with the English-speaking source countries, such as the USA at 17% and Ireland at 23%.
The authors also found 39% of students used interaction with current students when considering study overseas.
So, Gabby, this is quite an interesting study of the decision-making behaviour of students wanting to travel overseas. Would you agree that students start thinking about their study abroad plans before the age of 11? And do you think this makes the counselling process easier or harder?
I agree, definitely. And I think it pretty much depends on the student background. In our case, we have families with 3 or 4 children, and sometimes a 10-year-old has already seen their siblings traveling with us. So they are looking forward to the experience. Regarding independent students, I believe that they come to us once they have had a lot of information. I mean, first they do research, they join different social media groups in order to get information from peers, from people who have already had an experience, a study abroad experience. And then they come to us with all the information load, and they need to be guided as to what to choose. We feel that the percentage of students that travel abroad through educational agencies is higher than that. But it depends on the destination and the market, obviously. Counseling may be easier because the student comes to you with a lot of information, and so you don't need to spend so much time explaining to them what the program is about. They already know, yes. But on the other hand, sometimes it is difficult to retain the student because they do not just contact one agent. Sometimes they contact 3, 4 different agencies, and they start comparing prices and services and all sorts of things. So sometimes we spend a lot of time counseling one student, and then the lead is lost. That is what has changed.
Thank you. And Andrew, how much of an impact does tertiary study travel have on EC when planning courses like Pathways or ESP? And have you noticed this changing for any destinations?
Well, I'll start off with a bit of a personal anecdote, if you don't mind. But the picture you've got on the screen is the Sheldonian Theatre in Oxford, which is where my 20-year-old daughter is currently doing her 2nd year of university. And I remember the whole journey that we went through with her when she was a young child, and we started thinking about international education when she was about 10 years old, and that eventually led to her getting into boarding school in the UK, and then eventually her getting into university in Oxford. So that's on the sort of personal side. So I would agree that children are looking, and parents are looking at tertiary education at a very young age. In our case, I mean, our sort of exposure, naturally, we're planning courses like Pathways, and tertiary study has definitely a significant impact on what we're doing. Our Pathway courses in Canada was in fact designed to specifically meet the needs of students planning to go into tertiary education in Canada. And we've definitely seen a big uptick in demand for Canada as a destination. This is echoed in the US, where we are seeing more demand for tertiary education, particularly at community college level in the US. And our students prep with a combination of general English in our schools and academic English. We're also seeing an increase in students looking to study at universities that are English medium institutions in their own countries, what we call EMIs. And then we run our UniBridge program in Cambridge, which is designed to prepare students for university academic life with a variety of modules. So, and again, there's been a big sort of increase in higher ed in the UK as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that, Andrew. Let's move on to the next story. Member schools of English UK suffered a further decrease in students in 2021 as new data released by the ELT School Association shows the full extent of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the sector, although a preview of early 2022 business suggests some bounce back.
The English UK Student Statistics Report 2022 shows that 53,616 students were welcomed in 2021, representing a 35.7% decrease compared with 2020, and only around a tenth of the 508,614 students hosted in the pre-pandemic year of 2019.
Student weeks, meanwhile, declined by a further 12.9% to 462,046 in 2021, representing less than a quarter of the 1,839,655 weeks delivered in 2019.
For the 325 centres that reported data both in 2019 and 2021, there was an 88% drop in student numbers and a 71% decrease in student weeks between those 2 years, the authors said.
So, Andrew, let's go to you first. Do you have schools in the UK? How have they survived the pandemic in the face of such devastating losses over the last 2 years?
I mean, when you look at numbers like these are staggering losses. I mean, they're just mouth-watering, you know, it's unbelievable. And in fact, I recently posted on LinkedIn, you know, saying I bump into people who sort of are complaining about having lost 20% of their sales or 30% or, you know, a staggering 50% during the pandemic. I mean, how many industries can say they actually survived an 88% drop in student numbers? It's unbelievable. I mean, if you had asked me, you know, what do you think about this just a mere 2.5 years ago, I would have laughed and said this would be the end of the industry. And yet the industry has managed to largely survive. I'm surprised, you know, more, you know, schools didn't go down. I do think to a certain extent there are some schools that have become slightly zombified, and I wonder if they'll be able to sort of recover. I mean, it was extremely painful for us as an organization. Like others, we had to weather these sort of drops. Thankfully, we were able to get away with only shutting down one of our centers, which was our Oxford center. We managed to sort of keep, you know, our 5 main centers open in London, Brighton, Bristol, Manchester, and Cambridge. I think having centers in different parts of the world allowed us to sort of help support the UK centers, which regretfully have been the sort of toughest to pick up from the pandemic. In fact, out of our 6 destinations, 6 countries around the world, the UK has been slowest to recover. And I think that partly was able to help us because we always had somewhere open during the pandemic, or for most of the pandemic, somewhere was open and there was a lifeline of revenue coming in.
Okay, and how are things looking for the rest of 2022 for all your schools? Have you found that things are starting to pick up?
Numbers are finally picking up. I mean, you know, it's been so heartwarming to the rest of our team. I mean, we're nowhere near at 2019 numbers yet, so let's be clear about that. But I mean, we've seen solid recovery since Q4 of last year, since Q4 of last year. So we're now finishing our 3rd quarter of positive uplift, and at least we're sort of nearing break-even point again, which is very reassuring. And you know, it just puts a smile on people's face. I walk through some of our schools, and you know, we've got 500 students here in Malta. It's feeling like a real school again, and you know, you see the look on people's faces, on our staff's faces. They believe there's a future again, and that's important.
Well, that's good to hear. And I know that EC was quick to innovate during the pandemic, bringing in online courses such as those including VR headsets. Do such innovations have a place in the post-pandemic landscape, do you think? And how do you find bookings and student interest is for such courses?
Look, I definitely think they do have a place in the future landscape. I mean, obviously, our main core business is face-to-face bricks and mortar schools. Having said that, you know, like many other organizations around the world, we had to move online and very quickly in March of 2020. And I think for some group of students, there is still that demand to be able to follow a course remotely, and so ECV, EC Virtual, which is our online program, is definitely here to stay. It's something that will definitely continue into the future. We're still getting bookings for those programs from people who maybe either can't afford to travel or don't have the time to travel, or let's face it, there are still some people out there, not a small portion of the population, that are still worried to travel. And then the other area which we've been, you know, getting involved in on the stealth for the last 12 months has been virtual reality. It's a really exciting space. I think EC is leading the pack in this. I mean, we're one of the first schools I know of that are teaching English online through VR. So a place to watch, definitely a space to watch.
Thank you. And Gabby, according to our recent agency surveys on Argentina, the UK attracted 73% of Argentinian language travellers in 2017 and 84% in 2020, the first year of the pandemic. The UK remained open for travellers throughout the 2 pandemic years. What makes the country attractive for your students?
I guess our European descent. Most of us in Argentina come from a European background. So when it comes to learning English, people look at the other side of the Atlantic first. And then North America is like a second choice. Once you have been to the UK, then you can go to North America. That would be one of the reasons.
And we mentioned in the opening segment of this show that Aalto is looking at how schools and agencies can react to price changes quickly. With you being an Argentine agent with currency fluctuations, where currency fluctuations are a regular occurrence, do you have some advice on how to deal with these situations?
Yes, it's grin and bear and develop versatility skills. You know, we are survivors in this country. We have survived so many years of hyperinflation, more than inflation. But I mean, you get used to it. So let's hope that on a global scale, things get better.
Thank you, Gabby. And let's take another story now. The government of Quebec has announced an $80 million Canadian dollar scheme to attract and retain more international students into French medium post-secondary programs, including plans to massively reduce tuition fees for some students outside Quebec. The Minister of Immigration, Jean Boulet, announced the scheme, which will last for 4 years from the 2023-24 intake. Eligible students will pay the same as domestic students, representing an annual saving of $17,000 at college level and $24,000 at undergraduate level.
To be eligible, students must attend a higher education institution outside the territory of the Montreal metropolitan community, study a full-time program in French, and study in one of the labour priority sectors, which include information technology, engineering, health and social services, education, and early childhood education.
So, Andrew, EC has a school in Quebec. Do you think this scheme will attract students to the region?
I mean, I think it's a great scheme. I think we need more of these around the world. Let's be clear, this new scheme is obviously aiming to address labour shortages in Quebec, and it helps to promote immigration to Quebec, as we've seen happening in other parts of Canada. I mean, you know, what students cannot sort of can discredit sort of $24,000 per year reduction in education, and definitely in sort of areas which are of interest to students around the world. I mean, IT, you mentioned, engineering, healthcare, social services. So I think it's a very, very interesting scheme. And, you know, EC Montreal fully supports any scheme that obviously promotes Quebec as a destination to visit, study in, and immigrate to. At EC Montreal, we've had countless international students achieve French language proficiency required to attend their post-secondary studies in French, and we see this as a very, very positive thing. So let's bring on more of these initiatives.
Thanks, Andrew. Gabby, how do schemes such as this one affect agents? And they may be attractive to students, but what happens in terms of commission?
Yeah, there could be a negative side to it, but I believe that I mean, if students increase in numbers, we will all benefit. In fact, 4 ARSAA agencies were present during the ICEF Montreal event a couple of weeks ago, because none of us had ever been there, and we wanted to visit all the schools, all the colleges, in order to start working with Quebec as a destination. So I believe, I mean, we need to have more programs, more destinations, and because the number of students wishing to study in Canada is increasing day by day. And so we need more schools and educational institutions to cater for their needs.
Thank you. And at this point, we'll open up to the audience to see if there are any questions for our guests or for the Study Travel team. These can be on any of the stories or topics we've discussed today. Just checking the chat box, and there is a question from Myla. So we'll start with Andrew. RE, the scheme in Quebec, what will be the language of tuition, English or French? So that's obviously a question that is probably best answered by the news story that we've recently written and published on the Study Travel Network. So Myla, if you just want to have a look on there, it should say, which language it will be in.
I think it's in French.
I think it is in French.
It was, it was French medium. So it was promoting the French medium courses.
No other questions in there.
I've actually got one. Actually, I think it's come through direct to me rather than on the group chat. So I've got one from Barbara for Andrew. Does Andrew think that due to the increase on costs, schools in Malta will be suffering, and are agents becoming more demanding and expecting higher commissions and lower package prices? What is the way forward with this? Are schools going to be cornered and give in to agent demands, and which will tarnish the business expectations in the years ahead? So what do you think to that, Andrew?
It's like a lot of questions in one. So let's tackle the issue of Maltese schools being negatively impacted. I highly doubt it. Demand for Malta seems to be extremely strong, and I think schools are cognizant and aware of the fact that student volumes are less important than price per student week. I think today schools in Malta have really wisened up to that, and I think they realize that, look, you know, if I have 10% less students, but I have a much better sort of price per week, I'm going to have a much more sustainable school. So, and I think, you know, most responsible agents out there, and let's face it, most agents are responsible people, realize that the health, their own health is inextricably linked to the health of the school. If schools continue in a downward trajectory, becoming more and more unhealthy, ultimately we're all going to lose out. So, you know, you do get some sort of, you know, aggressive agents that try and push, but I mean, I think this is a dinosaur type of approach, and I think there's going to be less and less of this impacting Maltese schools, because they realize that we need to be sustainable. So I think that's sort of the gist of the question. Was there something else in there that I missed, Beth?
No, I think that was it. Yeah, I think you answered everything there. And we've got another one from Anthony. Is UK the only English-speaking country that doesn't allow English language students to work part-time during their studies?
Regretfully, I think the answer to that one is yes. I mean, the US is also very, very difficult unless students are studying on an OPT program. But, you know, the countries that do open their doors for work rights are definitely Canada, Australia, Ireland, Malta in the last few years as well. I'm hopeful, let me not say confident, but I'm hopeful at some point in time in the not too distant future. I think the UK government's going to need to change its policy on work rights. And I think when that happens, that's going to be a very good day for UK education as a whole.
Okay, I think we're all looking forward to that. And one more quick question before we go. We mentioned dynamic pricing I think in the first story. Do you think is that something that you do at EC schools, Andrew? And do you think that that's going to become more common in the future?
We spent a lot of money developing technology to allow our agents around the world to book in real time. And as far as I know, there aren't many organizations that allow this. We actually have an agent portal, which we launched back in 2017, which at the height, about 20% of all our bookings were coming in from agents directly into our portal. Now, this portal was a first step to eventually moving into dynamic pricing. The problem is, for dynamic pricing to really work, you need a proper GDS system, something like an Amadeus that there is in the travel sector. And our industry still hasn't managed to get its hands around something like this. There's been a lot of talks with some of the bigger organizations in our industry. I know Alto has had discussions around this. I think our industry, as it moves towards having dynamic pricing, will become a far healthier industry, because we'll be able to yield better. There will be times of the year when we can charge more and times when we'll charge less. But we're not there yet, unfortunately, as an industry.
Okay. And Gabby, what's the agent view on this? Do you think it's a positive thing?
It is indeed. And I agree with Andrew. I believe that we should all have one sole system and not different platforms, because nowadays you can use different platforms and it's a kind of a mess. So I also agree with him on what he said before regarding collaboration. I mean, we cannot just fight with our partner educators. We should be working as a team together. And as I said before, this is a very special time in which we need to rebuild customer loyalty and customer trust. So we have to think a bit less about having more income and a bit more about the sustainability, not only of our agency and our partner school, but of the industry as a whole. Because, I mean, there are many other sectors that depend on our industry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that looks like that's the end of our audience Q&A, which brings us to the end of this week's Study Travel TV Live.
Our next episode will be on Wednesday, the 15th of June at the same time of 4 p.m. BST. Visit the Study Travel TV Live page on Study Travel Network, which you can find under the magazine section in the menu, where we'll be announcing the guest speakers for the next broadcast, as well as a recording of this episode and past episodes.
So that's it for today. We'd like to say a big thank you to our special guests. Gabby, thank you for your time and insights today.
And Andrew, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm sorry about the connection issues at the beginning.
No problem. And Andrew, thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts. We look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you very much, Beth and Joshua, and Gabby, good to see you again.
Thank you. And thank you again to our sponsor this week, Londonist. Thanks for watching, everyone. Goodbye.